Hey guys, how you doing today? Just doing my dishes, so I thought, hey, what the heck? Might as well record a video, eh? At the same time. I think the big news that's worth talking about today from the basic income's perspective is Stephen Poloz. I hope I'm pronouncing that last name right. I've never actually said his name out loud, but the head of the Bank of Canada recently, it's been reported, said that what Canada could really use is some kind of CERB-like program, right? To help protect Canada from, economic instability that may occur. It was like the most softball sort of statement. Loud noises. It's like the most softball statement that I think a professional could make, right? Like really dipping his toe in, not committing to the idea that maybe a CERB-like program that could help protect from, some kind of thing that could maybe happen. You mean like a basic income? That could ameliorate, I don't know, a giant housing crash, for example, or, a pandemic, for example. Just like examples that maybe they exist. But this just continues to pile on the people who are, and not just voices like mine who are shouting out from the desert, right? Like people who are in power, who are in prominent positions, right? We've already got the Canadian Senate sending a letter to the Liberal Party of support. We've got the Bank of Canada, the president of the Bank of Canada, saying, some kind of CERB-like program would add a lot of stability to the system, which is exactly what proponents of the basic income have been saying for about 30, 40 years now. Maybe even longer than that, even. So it's getting to the point now where these prominent people in powerful positions are really signaling their support and indicating that these sorts of things are happening. And so let's be kind to the Liberals for a second. I'm not kind. I think that the base reason for why they're not moving on a basic income is because they're cowards who are still subservient to corporate power first and foremost. They don't give a shit about the workers. But let's be kind to them for a second. So what they must be looking for, right? Because it's becoming obvious that this is something that they have to do, right? And when the second wave comes, it's going to be smacking them in the face. I'm already reading articles about hey, here in Ontario, is Doug Ford willing to shut the economy back down? Because he's going to have to when the second wave comes. This whole ridiculous myth that people are living in where we'll just reopen the economy, everything will be fine, we can go back to life as normal, that's great. It's not going to happen, right? Even without the second wave, right? A lot of the job losses that we're experiencing and that we are seeing, especially in the States, right? The States is going through it in an accelerated way because they've put in no safety net whatsoever. They've basically just flipped the bird to the working class and said, okay, go fuck yourself. Good luck. No, not even good luck. Literally just go die, please. And you're seeing the consequences of that in an accelerated rate, right? Food lines, mass unemployment is the big one, right? And that mass unemployment is going to happen here in Canada too. And you're going to have big spikes that are sustained. They're not going to be able to just maintain themselves. You can't close places like I've been seeing. Pier 1 is closing, Victoria's Secret's closing, right? More are going to close. It's going to happen. It's not going to be like a big secret that there's going to be lots of people out of work, right? And if you've built your system around the idea that food and shelter should be withheld unless a person can sell themselves into a market dominated by billionaires, then that's a complete disaster. You can't really recover from that unless you actually put in some kind of stabilizing force. or to quote Stephen Pelosi, some kind of, I don't know, like a CERB-like program, like, I don't know, something basic, that would give them an income. So it's just getting so damn stupid. Anyway, so if you're the liberals, right, like, what's the timing? Because that's what they're looking for, right? If you want to be nice, if you don't want to say, okay, they're just cowards who are not willing to do what actually needs to be done in order to protect people, they're in it for themselves, who are just political gamesmanship, right? Is really what they're looking at. And so, okay, political gamesmanship. What's the timing? What is it going to take for these guys to finally pull the switch and say, okay, we need a basic income? And I actually think, on one hand, like, the second wave is a good excuse. Once the second wave comes and once it becomes obvious, like, lots of these jobs are not coming back. Like, the society is not going to just go back to the way it was. It's going to try, don't get me wrong, like, and people like Stephen Pelosi are like, I feel pretty, like, optimistic that after this pandemic's over, right, there'll be lots of creation of business and all that. And sure, that might be fine, that might be true. There's also going to be lots of people in the interim who are going to be unemployed and who are going to be in a bad way. And so I think that the liberals are looking... What I really think the liberals are looking at is they're looking at the countries who are actually passing the legislation, right? Spain is passing the legislation. Ireland is passing the legislation, right? Like, there are countries in Europe, because in Europe the basic income has like an 80% support rate, like, or maybe a touch lower than that, like in the 70s of support. And if you've got a policy that has that kind of level of support, right, it's pretty safe that you can pass that without too much popular pushback. The concern, of course, is that because the liberals are cowards, right, they're worried that it's actually going to fail. That it isn't going to work the way that they think it's going to work. It's not going to happen the way the proponents of the basic income, who have, like, studied it and focused on it, and this is strictly because people are still stuck in this kind of neoliberalism way of thinking about things, where you've got to give money to billionaires, and those billionaires will turn around and trickle that down into the economy, and everything's great that way. You can just look at America to see how that fails instantly, right? Like, they fund, like, if that worked, it would have worked in America for sure, because they gave trillions of dollars. Like, not billions. They gave trillions of dollars. They put so much money. Like, this is how much money they gave to the corporate billionaire class in America, that they could have given every American $1 billion. Like, that's how much money they gave to the corporate class in America in order to keep their system going. They gave them so much money that they could have given every American $1 billion. And it failed. It didn't work. The system collapsed. There's people standing in bread lines. There's mass unemployment. And then on top of that, their healthcare system is an absolute disaster. So that's a whole other subject. So if neoliberalism worked, which it doesn't, the only way neoliberalism and capitalism in general propagates itself is through violence. Violence and slavery. That's how it's always interacted with the world. That's how we've always seen capitalism propagate itself. There's this riff, and there's still people who come at me with this, where they're like, capitalism has alleviated poverty more than any other system in the world. I think if you're saying that out loud, you gotta be illiterate. Like, you just gotta be illiterate. Like, to just so, like, openly say, like, capitalism's the best system that we've come up with. Like, literally, while capitalism propagates itself through the invasion of other countries. Someone asked me just today, well, then what system do you have in mind? And the only thing I could, like, really come up with, because these people aren't really interested in getting into theory. They're not interested in hearing nuance, right? And if you start getting into nuance with them, they just kind of shut down and just start mocking you because they don't, or attempting to mock you because they don't know anything, right? And because they are the guys who are saying that capitalism is the greatest system in the world. And so I looked at this guy and I was just like, yeah, it's a weird idea, dude. It's called sharing, right? And that's really what it's kind of coming down to for me. It's like, oh, like, are we going to share or are we not going to share? That's really what it is. That if you have this sort of heightened level of inequality, you have this ridiculous accruing of wealth, you start to ask yourself, well, wait a minute, that's not working, right? Being selfish and letting one or two people get all the benefit is clearly not working. Well, maybe we should try sharing. Maybe that's an idea. And it really struck me. It was this little moment I had where I was like, oh yeah, like that is like the fundamental backbone of what we're talking about here, right? And it gets colored in language and it gets complicated or made complex, which is something I definitely believe in. I think that things are purposefully made complex so that the powerful can sort of obfuscate their intentions behind flowery language or behind a dense, complicated speech. When the core issue actually is, are we a society that shares, right? Or are we a society that gives 2 or 3 people all the benefit, right? Are we selfish or do we share? And right now, in the moments where we've actually said to each other, oh no, we should share, like creating a universal healthcare system, that is a moment where we've looked at each other and said, we should share. Like, we should share that for sure. Right? And this gets, even from the left, it gets colored in like really flowery, overt language, like things like rights, things like all that kind of stuff. And that's wonderful. You can talk about rights and freedoms, and like those are all embedded in a long tradition, right, of that kind of language. So I understand why that language gets used, but really it is, are we sharing with one another or not? And once you put it in those terms, it becomes like almost kindergarten-ish talking to these people, where you're just like, really, are we really going to have a conversation where I have to talk to you about the value of sharing? Like, where's Mr. Dress Up? like, do we need to bring out like Mr. Rogers here? And the answer seems to be yeah. Like, it does seem to be like, yeah, we need to have a significant conversation about the value of sharing. And when you like think about, and then of course someone will say to me like, oh well, that's simplistic. And it's like, yeah, it is simple. Like, I understand that it's difficult for you, but for the rest of us who understand these things, it's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. Every time that we've looked at our society and said we should share, it's worked out, right? Every time. And it's worked out for really, really obvious reasons, which is that if everyone is having a similar experience, right? And if a policy is passed that affects everyone on kind of equal measure, then you can have more genuine conversations and you can talk about these things in ways that are more rational if the shared experience is somewhat equal. Like, I suspect that a wealthy person's access to healthcare is probably still better than mine, certainly. But I've been given a foundation to stand on. There's a floor that I can stand on and say, no, I'm okay. So I don't actually care if somebody does better, right? Like, that's the big thing that I think a lot of these people are missing. That what people are calling for isn't actually equality, right? And I think that muddies the argument. I think what people are actually calling for is just stability. That's it. Like, just basic needs. Like, just basic stability. I want everyone to equally have the same level of stability. And if somebody can then stand on that stability and go, oh, well, okay, I'm this stable, then I'm going to get this much money and I'm going to get this height and I'm going to become an inventor and the king of the world and I'm going to go to the moon and I'm going to take over the business world and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, great. Good for you. Like, good for you, buddy. For real. Like, off you go. Live your life. No one's going to stop you. Well, that's not true. Lots of people are going to try to stop you, but that's life for you. But, like, if you want to do that and you want to scale that, you want to challenge that, you want to fight that, you go ahead. I'm more interested in challenging myself in different ways, right? Like, it's very odd because, like, everyone has respect for a person who climbs a mountain, right? The people who climbed Mount Everest for the first time, right? I was taught about those people in school. Like, we have a massive amount of respect for people who go and do powerful things that have personal strength, right? You think like someone like Terry Fox is a great example of this, right? Terry Fox, he wanted to do something really big and really strong to bring forth awareness for an issue he really cared about. And he did that by running across Canada, and considering his condition, is an amazing thing to embark on. But it doesn't make people richer, right? It didn't make a billionaire any extra money, right? So it has no intrinsic value to them, which, like, this is sort of the nature of the conversation. Like, why is it that the only way that you can find value in this society is through this very narrow, very small window of communication, and that communication being financial, right? That if you can't, or you don't care to, find this sort of business acumen level or way of communicating with the world, then you're left behind and you're called lazy and you're called incompetent and I'll go get a better job and well, what are you, stupid, and all this kind of stuff, right? And I do want to pause for a moment and say something about if you're stupid, you should have consequences. If you make bad choices, you should have consequences. Yeah. You should have consequences. Failure is the consequence, right? It didn't work, it failed, that's the consequence. Homelessness and starvation should be taken off the table. Those should not be consequences that we take seriously, right? That I don't want the worst people in our society to suffer homelessness and starvation. I don't think that if a person has an idea, and even if it's a stupid idea, right? I don't know why we're punishing that, right? Because that's kind of an inevitable consequence. Every time somebody, like, if you want to have a system that generates ideas, you're going to have stupid ideas. You're going to have people do stupid things. It's going to happen. That's an inevitability. And if you want the good ideas to happen, you need the stupid ideas to happen, right? And when the stupid ideas happen, I don't think they should be punished with homelessness and starvation, and which is what's on the table. And it's just this absurd system we've generated that at the end of the day, we can just say, well, no, forget that. There's so much food. There's so much. We have enough shelter. Absolutely, we've got these things. We just need to share them, right? We just need to share them. We just need to say to the people living in our society, right, from the outset. Like, can you imagine if you were born into a society that said from the outset, you've got food, you've got shelter, right? Whatever idea you've got, whatever thing you want to explore, however you want to deal with your own sort of existential self, whatever endeavor you would like to go down, we're going to support that, and we think that there's value in that. And will that generate dumb things? Yeah, because humans are dumb. We're the definition of dumb. We can't not be dumb. That's who we are, that's how we interact, right? But for every person creating and doing what you consider to be dumb things, right? And that's a big part of it too, right? What you consider dumb, other people consider genius. So for every person doing that, though, there's a person doing genuinely good work, right? Like who's taking advantage of their leisure time to be able to focus on important things and focus on beneficial things for their society, right? Like, I just feel like right now there's definitely a kid who's as smart as Isaac Newton, who has got some idea in his head that he's struggling with and that he's working with, right? But he's stuck at Burger King flipping burgers, you know? It breaks my heart to think about that. And I definitely know it's true. I know it's true because I've talked to those kids. I've talked to those kids, man, who are just stuck in these burger flipping jobs where they're selling these sorts of things, and they're never going to get out of those jobs. Maybe one day the best that they'll do is they'll be able to be the manager of those places, right? That might be the best that they'll ever get to, and that'll be their lot. And if that's what you want to do, off you go. I've got there's no shame in that. I work with a manager right now who I think's brilliant. I think he's a brilliant person, and he's doing what he loves, and he does it better than anybody I've ever met in my life. But if you're a person who wants to study, wants to learn, thinks that they can help the society in different ways, this place crushes you down, and it's because we haven't really decided, like, do we want to share or do we not want to share? And I think we should share. All right, guys. This is the end of me. I hope you're having a good time out there. I love you all. Have fun. Support the basic income. Stephen Pelosi does. Good luck.